if you have a special education child, or if you have a child with special needs or receives specially designed instruction, this is why. This is the basis. This is the foundation for you to be able to understand why it's done.
This episode is going to talk to you about why special education is actually there, why your child who has an IEP gets the services they do.
So free appropriate public education FAPE is the most important tenet of the law because it makes it illegal, it makes it unconstitutional for folks to be eliminated from public school education based on what they bring to the table. I could have just jumped in and started talking about IEPs and all the different things that special education have. You could start with just a number of different ways, but I felt it was important for folks to understand why, if you have a special education child, or if you have a child with special needs or receives specially designed instruction, this is why. This is the basis. This is the foundation for you to be able to understand why it's done. So I thought that was important. Key ideas. I'm going to share this screen here. Key ideas in Public Law 94-142. We're going to talk about that first one there, the first bullet, free appropriate public education, FAPE. FAPE is a thing that wasn't in place prior to this law. As stated in that last screen, a large percentage of the students were not served in a public school. 1 in 5 are not served in a public school. And for the more severe kids with intellectual disabilities, Down syndrome, a number of physical disabilities, they were not allowed in public schools. Some states didn't allow them in at all. They were sent to institutions like Willowbrook. So free appropriate public education FAPE is the most important tenet of the law because it makes it illegal and makes it unconstitutional for folks to be eliminated from public school education based on what they bring to the table. You could have a learning disability, an emotional disability, emotional disturbance, any number of different things that a child can be afflicted with or could have based on how they were born, or how they've developed and how their brains are developed. Everybody's brain develops differently. Everybody is not a fluid reader. Everybody is not a fluid math fact cruncher. Everybody is not able to understand the nuances of behaviors and expectations in the public setting. So FAPE provides the opportunity for those folks who have, I want to say, disabilities, limitations, gaps in their learning, mental health issues, to still access that. And you have to thank Geraldo Rivera for having the guts to get up in there and expose that, because it really helps to spur along where we're at right now. The next tenet, bullet number 2, least restrictive environment. Every student is entitled to have their educational experience in the least restrictive environment. There's a continuum of services that are available to students that range anywhere from, on the far end, gifted. So students with those, we talked about those IQ scores. Students 130, 140, 150 IQs are also entitled to specially designed instruction to enhance their education. That's the top of the continuum of services. So you have kids who are gifted that need to be served in the least restrictive environment. And then you go down the continuum of services, and it goes from, once again, the least restrictive to the most restrictive environment. So in a public school setting, least restrictive environment indeed is in a seat in a general education a classroom following the general education curriculum and standards that are set by the federal government and the states that you reside in. And the students are expected to meet those standards and become proficient in those standards. And every state, I'm sure, has a system of assessing that. In the state of Pennsylvania, where I'm at, you have the PSSA and the Keystone exams. And those are high stakes tests. The government looks at those, they publish those, and schools can show that they're making great progress or they're struggling in some areas. And the parents can look at that, and that's the public education portion of it. You have the opportunity to look and see where your child stands compared to maybe some nationwide standards or statewide standards. And more recently, there has been assessments developed for students who are intellectually disabled that have a need to have a altered test. That's called the PASA in Pennsylvania Alternative State Assessment. And there are certain qualifications that students have to have, and that's part of the IEP. And at some point, when I break down the IEP piece by piece, that'll be explained in more detail. So, least restrictive environment, back to that again. You have general education classroom. Then you're going to have next, it's a little bit more restrictive, where you're going to have a kid pulled out into a itinerant support system or a full-time support system. And the semantics on it are a little different. So if a kid really struggles, let's say with reading, they may have a child go to a special education support classroom to address the reading need or a mathematics need or a behavioral need. So that's the next step on the least restrictive environment. And then you're going to have, within a public school, you're going to have a full-time placement. And that's much more restrictive, where the kids are not in the general education curriculum. And there was a trend back in the 90s that was called mainstreaming. And it's still in place today. It's just may have a different name by now. But folks felt that, the government felt and leaders felt that kids should be educated in their public schools in a general education curriculum as much as possible. So mainstream. There are some students, more of your life skills students who are intellectually disabled within a public school setting, have to be a little further down the restrictive environment to a more restrictive environment in a full-time pull-out classroom. Now, you always want to have the kids within those classes get as much general ed exposure as possible. There's a part in the IEP where you have to show how much of a percentage of their day is spent in general education. Then if it's not, then you have to provide justification in a written statement in that IEP that states why they are not in with the general education curriculum at that point, or in general education students at that point. A little further down the restrictive environment, where I deal with on a daily basis as an emotional support teacher at an approved private school, is an approved private placement away from the public school that they should be attending, but their disability or their classification or their emotional disturbance, or sometimes an autistic support type student has to be served, or it's more appropriately stated they should be served in a more restrictive environment due to behaviors and the severe learning needs that they have based on mostly those behaviors. So that's the next step in the restrictive environment. And that is pretty much the most restrictive environment. There are things that are further. There were a child may be so behaviorally challenged that they're in a residential treatment facility, and that is the most restrictive environment, because not only are they not living at home any longer, they're living in a very restricted environment in that residential treatment facility, and they're getting their education there also. So that's what the least restrictive environment, LRE, means. We always, as a special education team, have to function with the child in the least restrictive environment when appropriate, and that becomes a decision of the team. And the team, I'll talk about that in a minute here. When we get into the individualized education program, the team has to decide those things. And a little further down the line, there's procedural due process that results as a part of that process also.